Got it.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the SASS Meetup on the 24th of August, 2022, about anti-nuptial contracts, represented by Amy Bernard. I am Rick Robenheimer. I'm the current president of the South African Secular Society, and it is my pleasure to welcome Amy and say a little bit about her before we commence. I'm going to just get my screen up here. So Amy is, first of all, an applicant marriage officer, which means that she's in the process of becoming a SASS marriage officer, but she's not quite there yet, not designated yet. She is also a qualified attorney, notary public, and a mediator working online at Marx and Bernard Mediation. She specialises in family law and drafts anti-nuptial contracts for prospective spouses. And so in this talk this evening, Amy will explain the importance of an anti-nuptial contract, how to go about explaining them to prospective spouses if you're a marriage officiant, and she will be able to take questions at certain points in the presentation. So Amy, over to you.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you. Okay, so I'm actually going to start at the beginning because it's really important if you're talking about anti-nuptial contracts to understand what South African law states about how you're married and what happens if you're married without an anti-nuptial contract. Because if you're giving advice on anti-nuptial contracts, you have to be able to tell people why exactly they should have an anti-nuptial contract. And the reason for that is very much to do with what we have in South Africa, which is if you get married without an anti-nuptial contract, you are married in community of property. I've brought my pots along with me to demonstrate what community of property is. So let's say Sally and James are getting married, and when they get married, they do not have an anti-nuptial contract. Then they are automatically married in community of property, which means all of Sally's things, and Sally had a lot of things, and all of Jack's one thing are now in the same pot. They belong to the same thing. So in community of property means that everything that you own before and during your marriage is put into one communal pot. Debtors can then also take out of the communal pot. Even if it's Jack who's gotten into debt, they can take out of the communal pot and start taking things away. That is why we as South Africans often do anti-nuptial contracts. It's to protect spouses against debt. So creditors coming to collect on certain debts. So if you have an anti-nuptial contract, it works a little bit different. I'm going to take all my little shoppers, there's lots of them, and give them back to Sally, and give Jack back his one avocado. That's all he has. So Sally, if there's an anti-nuptial contract and they are married outside of community of property, so they conclude an anti-nuptial contract, they're married outside of community of property, what happens is this. There's two separate pots at the date of marriage, and those two separate pots remain two separate pots. On the date of divorce or death, there's two ways that it can go. Number one, with the inclusion of the accrual system, they will form one joint pot of all the things that they have summed together during their marriage. So that will form part of the joint pot, and that will be divided. But you are protected from creditors if you have an anti-nuptial contract. Does anyone have any questions so far? Resounding silence, so no, I assume not.
You're going to cover accrual later, or should I ask a question about that?
Well, you could ask a question about that, but I am also going to cover it in a bit, what the accrual system is.
Okay, carry on, thanks.
When I go through drafting. Okay, so the reason why we have antenuptial contracts is not to protect you against divorce or death, which would be the only ways that you can get out of a marriage, or either divorce or death. So it's not to protect against that, it's to protect you against creditors. So I am a specialized attorney. I do called a Notary Public. We're specialized attorneys that are allowed to draft and register antenuptial contracts with the deeds office. There are a few things that marriage officers need to know about antenuptial contracts so that they can give advice to their clients, their prospective spouses. Prospective spouses need advice regarding why it's such a good idea to get an antenuptial contract. So firstly, it's a protection against creditors. Secondly, it means that you as a couple have clarity on how your property would be divided on death or divorce. And it's also just a very good idea because you don't know what the future is going to hold. You don't know what exactly will happen with either one of you. I've had many clients come back to me and state they're so happy that they got an antenuptial contract because they've had their spouse has somehow gotten into a lot of debt, and debt collectors have come to collect their stuff and they couldn't collect it because they were married out of community of property. So when somebody comes to me as a notary public, when they come to me and they ask me about an antenuptial contract, they state that they want to get married out of community of property. I tell them then that they have two choices. So the two choices are this: with the inclusion of the accrual system or without the inclusion of the accrual system. So if you include the accrual system, the antenuptial contract, and I have one with me here, the antenuptial contract will state that the accrual system is included, and they will have starting values or things that are specifically excluded from the joint, that will never form part of the joint estate. For example, anything left to you in a will, you can specifically state that you're going to exclude a house. For example, if you owned a house before you got married, you could state specifically that that house and any proceeds that come from that house will be excluded. And you can also say that your starting values are at a certain amount. Generally, what people do if they're young and they're getting married for the first time, they do their starting values at 0 and 0, which essentially means that they're married at the time of divorce or death. They're married in community of property because everything forms part of the same pot if you put your values at 0. So if your values are at 0, then everything forms part of the pot because it means that you stated that you own nothing before you got married, and everything forms part of the pot. But if I see it a lot with second marriages, you put in a amount that you walked into the marriage with. I came into the marriage with 400,000 Rand in my bank account, a house, and 3 cars that are specifically excluded from ever being part of that joint pot, which we looked at earlier, the joint pot that Sally is now saying, all of these things that are in my pot will never form part of any joint pot. Okay. So you can specifically exclude certain things. And then obviously when you get married, you start to accumulate assets. You accumulate a couch, and who knows who bought it. You can't say specifically, oh, Sally bought the couch and Jack bought the TV, because quite frankly, it's all muddled up. The other option for an antenuptial contract is with the exclusion of the accrual system. As a notary, I never really suggest this unless the parties are much older, and I'm saying usually I suggest it to people who are over the age of 70, 65 and up. I'd suggest getting married with the exclusion of the accrual system. The reason for this is that you do accumulate a lot of things during your marriage, and it's very difficult to separate those things. And if you exclude the accrual system, it means that what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. But at the date of divorce or death, it's very difficult to prove what is whose and whose is what. So I don't generally tell people that they should have the exclusion of the accrual system, because during a marriage, you are going to accumulate things together, and there are going to be things that you build together, and that should be divided on death or divorce. So that is my usual suggestion for people when they come and ask me about what to do about an antenuptial contract and which one to choose. And most people, especially if they've gotten advice from grandparents or older generation, will say that they want to exclude the accrual system. And it's quite an old school thought of doing that, but it actually causes a lot of, it sounds terrible, but a lot of trouble at divorce. And as a divorce attorney, I see it a lot that it becomes an issue if the accrual system is excluded. So I wouldn't suggest excluding the accrual system. Does anyone have any questions so far? No? Okay, carry on then. Okay. So when someone comes to me and asks me for an antenuptial contract, there's a few things that the law stipulates that they need to do. And this is what's important to marriage officers. Number one, an antenuptial contract must be signed in the presence, sorry about that, signed in the presence of a notary public, and it must be signed by both parties and 2 witnesses. I'm just going to open up my antenuptial contract. Give me 1 second. I can show anybody. So you've got the 2 parties over here, the notary public who signs it with them, and the 2 witnesses that sign as well. So that's really, really important. And this document must be signed before the date of marriage. So it must be signed before they get married. It can be registered after they get married, but it should be signed. It has to be signed before marriage. But I usually try, as a notary public, I usually try to make sure that mine are registered before the marriage takes place in the deeds office. And that's why you need a specific qualification to do it, because it needs to be registered in the deeds office. So that's basically most of what I would like to say, other than I can discuss cost of what it costs generally, if anyone's interested, or are there any questions from the floor? Yes, Rick.
I presume if one doesn't have a copy of one's antenuptial contract, which I'm having trouble finding because now I need it because my wife's died, that one can go to the deeds office and get a copy. You can.
They have a registry, and also the notary who did your antenuptial contract has to keep record of your antenuptial contract, so they will also have a copy. We call it a protocol.
Okay. And can one approach any deeds office? I presume they're all around the country.
So they have I would suggest doing it in the province that you registered it, just because a lot of the time they have quite backwards ways of saving documentation. But so I would say usually you should try and do it for the province that you registered it in. So for example, in Gauteng, which I assume you registered it in Gauteng.
Yes, it would have been Gauteng. Just thinking back to the year and whether Gauteng existed at the time, but I think it did.
Okay, so do you be gone?
You broke up a bit there, sorry.
I said, do you think that the attorney who did it, do you think the attorney's still alive, or?
I have no idea. I would have to find the contract to find out who the attorney is, which is kind of defeating the object, really.
Okay, so what you can do is you can do it, you'd need to speak to somebody who's local and who is a conveyancer or a notary in your area that can go and request the documents, the original documents from the deeds office for you on your behalf.
Oh, right. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, Charles?
Yes, Amy, I just want to know, how does it impact on, so like my wife also passed away and I have an anti-nuptial contract, everything was drawn up as you just explained. How does that impact now as part of an estate of a person that has died? Because I haven't activated my estate, it's been now 18 months now, so I've basically I've not activated my wife's estate in any way.
Is there a will?
Yes, there is a will. I get basically everything, and if both of us pass away, my son will get so everything, but 95% of everything that we have, I bought, from the cars to the furniture to everything like that. So, but I've not activated anything yet.
Okay, so basically what you'd be saying is then your wife's portion of her estate, did you get married without accrual or with accrual?
I think it could be with accrual. I'm not 100% sure, but I got to suspect it is with accrual.
Okay, so if it's with accrual, then what will happen is at the time, so your wife would have left the entirety of her estate to you, and if you predeceased her, to your child. So
that's right.
Basically what will happen is half of what you own would be, technically speaking, your wife's, would have been your wife's estate property. It belongs to the estate. And then you receive all of those things.
Yes. So I just was. Oh, carry on. Sorry.
So basically, if there's any large assets in the estate, for example, if there's a house or a car or anything like that, what you do is you would then state that half of all of those things belong to your wife's estate and that they have been left to you. What I would try and do is state that the house, if there's a house or anything like that, is there a house?
Yes, there is.
I would try and say that the house is already your portion.
Yes,
so that you don't have to transfer.
Yeah, I've done that. Okay, yeah, definitely, because the house is registered in my name. Even all the vehicles, everything is registered in my name.
Then that's great, because then you won't be paying. Then you won't be paying as much in death duties or anything like that. So it's actually better that most things are in your name. And then they have you got an attorney to help you with the estate?
My son is an attorney, so. I'm trying to convince him to do the estate, but he doesn't really want to.
Yeah, if you don't do estates, then estates are generally not really anyone's favorite thing to do. I personally don't do estates, but it is something that you either really like doing or you don't do at all.
No.
So I hope your son does help you.
No, my son is 95% of what does is criminal law. So.
Okay, so then he's definitely not going to be interested.
No, he doesn't like anything with debt or finance-wise or anything like that.
Well, perhaps he can find somebody for you, that one of his friends from varsity that could probably help you.
Okay. Now, because my concern, the reason behind my question is paying that estate duty and stuff like that. That's a lot of money unnecessary, where I know 95% of the things I paid for, and now I've got to go and pay taxes on the stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big problem. The problem is that if you're married out of community of property, including this system of accrual, half of that stuff is considered to be in there automatically. So it's unfortunate, but it's actually what the law states.
Okay. Okay, no, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Sorry, Charles. I hope I wish I had a
No,
better
no, no,
answer.
no. It gives me better things. So I'll just delay it. I will delay it a bit more, and then make sure I transfer everything over to my son before I activate anything.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Amy, could I ask when did I know there's a magical date when the whole concept of with accrual came into being, because when I got married, I don't think it existed. When did that start in South Africa?
You're asking me a really good question. Back in my studying days, I think it was in the 80s.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Well, it doesn't matter. It's
84.
just a,
84.
Okay.
It was in 84, 1984.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Henry, we can't hear you. Still can't hear you, Henry. You're on mute.
No.
There we go. I can hear you now. Nope. Guys, has anyone else got any questions?
Yes, please. Henry was saying something, but he's muted.
No, I think it's my signal here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Just quickly before my signal goes off again. On the day when you actually sign, you know, when you do the marriage ceremony, I was told when I got married that, you know, if you're not married community of property, you need to show proof of your contract, the ANC contract. Does that mean you have to have the original, or does it mean there must be a copy of it for you to keep with all the documentation?
So generally what I do, and this isn't something that everyone does, I write a letter. So basically stating these people appeared before me. We have signed an antenuptial contract. This is my legal practice council number. This is, you know, it states everything that was stated on the thing. And I also give them a copy of the antenuptial contract that's signed, an originally signed copy. So unfortunately, when you do an antenuptial contract with me, you sign 4 copies so that we have originally signed 4 copies. And I make sure that that document is with them. But like I said before, I like to get it registered before they get married and get it back from the deeds office so that they have the registered copy as well. So the one that's stamped by the deeds office as well. But you can just do a letter.
So a letter would suffice, and then that with your documentation then goes off to you know, the department, and that would be suffice.
That it should, yes.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Rick?
Yes, I don't know if you can answer this, but perhaps you can speculate on it at least.
Sure.
If having an antenuptial contract is, or if being out of community of property is the safest option for a couple, why did they, when drafting the law, state that the default is in community of property?
So that people get half. I don't know. I suspect it's so that lawyers have some work.
Interesting suspicion. Of course, half the people in Parliament are lawyers anyway, so maybe
probably
that's not entirely idle speculation.
Yeah, I don't think I'm far off. But honestly, I think also, Rick, the problem is that the law regarding all of this was written in the 80s, and there were a lot of housewives that were home, and that didn't work, and then, you know, the men would go out and work, and when they got divorced, then they would then automatically be entitled to half. So I think it was also drafted around that kind of era, you know, of life.
Right. Thanks.
Anyone else got a question? We all good?
Well, in which case we're having a fairly short session tonight. So
Yeah.
any other questions? Anybody? Anton, you joined the call a bit late, so you missed the beginning. Any questions from your side?
Yeah, can we start again?
No.
All you
No,
have to know is there's a pot, and you don't want one pot. You want 2 pots, Anton. That's all you need to know. There was a
Okay, I'm
pot and
sorry.
everything. You missed the whole thing. I
Yeah,
even got
okay.
the My Little Shoppers out for this.
Apologies all around, but yeah, no, it's unfair. I'll just pick up the Stompies and I'll do some retro research via Rick and yourself.
Awesome.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, Anton, then, and thank you particularly, Amy, for taking the trouble to come and talk to us about this and give us an explanation, which will in due course go onto the training material for our officiants, so it can enjoy a wider audience.
Awesome. My pots can enjoy a wider audience.
Yes. Good. Well, thank you all. Most of the people here are known to me, except for Charles. So I will just do the commercial, and that is that please visit secularsociety.org.za online, where you can find out more about SASS, and also join as a paying member if you like, so that your money can work for you in the secular environment even when you are sleeping. It's only through the contributions of members that we're able to, for example, pay for Zoom, which allows us to do meetings of unlimited length like this one. So I invite you to get a deeper commitment to SASS if you'd like to find out more about us. Otherwise, we have the Meetup group through which some people have come to this meeting. And then we have a lot of Telegram groups where people can stay in touch as well, either in their community or as part of the Marriage Officer program, or as a volunteer, or just come and chat to other secular people. You will find links to that on the SASS website as well.
Okay.
So again, Amy, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Rick.
And see you online. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
night,
Good night.
everybody. Have a good
Bye,
weekend.
guys.
Bye,
Cheers.
Amy.
Bye-bye.
Sorry.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.